specifically doing now with the randomized control trial.
Okay, sure.
So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. I am interested in helping children with autism develop language because that's my specialty area. There are quite a few children with autism who don't learn to talk. There used to be more. Luckily, there are fewer now, probably because they're getting earlier intervention. Nonetheless, there are some children who don't learn to talk. And if they don't learn to talk by the time they're 5 or 6, the chances that they're going to learn later is very reduced. And if they don't learn to talk sometime, their opportunities for mainstream integration, for vocational options, for advanced schooling become very, very limited. So the idea is to try to get kids to talk by the time they're 5 or 6 if you possibly can. So what I wanted to do is to take 2 approaches that have the potential to teach children with autism to talk and to compare them just to see which one is better. Part of it is around this sort of debate within the field about which of those approaches that we discussed is best. But what I wanted to do was not show that one was better than the other, but simply to try to find out how can we enhance each of these approaches to make them the most functional, the most successful for the kids with autism and their families. So I identified 2 approaches that I thought were interesting. One is called rapid motor imitation therapy. Rapid motor imitation therapy is a form of very strict behavioral intervention. It's a do what I do and then get a reward. The thing that's a little bit different about it is instead of just having the child, say dog, say sheep, whatever, the child goes through a series of motor actions before they're asked to say anything. And the idea is that the motor actions sort of catalyze the vocal behavior, that once the child gets in the mood of complying, in a sense, and gets a rhythm or a momentum of motor compliance, that perhaps that will ease their ability to produce these vocal behaviors. Because many children with autism really have trouble getting out sounds and putting sounds together. So I thought maybe providing this sort of motor momentum would help them. So what rapid motor imitation therapy looks like is you teach the child to imitate a series of very rapid, very simple motor actions. So you teach them to go before they do anything else. So you spend some time teaching them to do all this motor imitation. And for many children with autism, that in and of itself is very, very hard. In fact, some of the children we had in our study were never able to learn that, and they had to be eliminated from the study. So, I mean, right there, we're excluding a rather large group of kids. But for the kids who were able to learn, they then went on to be randomized to our true treatments. So they might get the motor imitation treatment, which is the one they actually need the motor skills for, or they might get the other treatment. And the other treatment is a very standard, very well-established naturalistic treatment that has been used extensively with children with mental retardation as well as autism to elicit first words from children who aren't yet speaking. It's called milieu communication training. And it's exactly the kind of approach I was talking about before, where you engineer the environment so that everything the child wants is in sight but out of reach, and they have to get adults' help for everything that they want. So that's the second approach. So we made sure everybody could do motor imitation so that they were all on the same level, but then we randomized them to one of those 2 treatments. Now, the wrinkle in this study is that we not only provided them with those 2 treatments, we also provided all the parents, no matter which group their child was in, we provided all the parents with parent training to do some of these naturalistic techniques. So even the kids who were getting the very strict behavioral approach were getting some of the naturalistic approach at home, whereas the children who were getting the naturalistic approach were getting even more of it at home. And the idea was to say, okay, we know these strict behavioral techniques work, but they don't generalize. If we build a natural piece into the intervention from the beginning, will the children take what they're learning in the very strict behavioral approach and use it more frequently in the real world? Will they go outside the therapy room and use what they've learned? So that was kind of the premise of the study.
How are you able to look at whether they are able to use these techniques?
What we did was we tested the children before they started the study, and we did a whole range of standard diagnostic tests, but we also took samples of their communication in which we engaged them in activities that we thought they would find very appealing, and then we would just stop and wait and see if they would do something, either say a word, make a sound, use a gesture, look at us, do something to indicate that they wanted more of what we had given them. And then we just looked at the initial evaluation to see how many times they used words. Now, of course, we were limiting it to children who were hardly talking, so none of them used more than 10 words at the beginning of the study. And then basically we did the same thing at the end. So we not only did sort of standard measures, we also did these communication samples, and we counted again how many words did they use at the end of the study as compared with how many they used at the beginning. And that was kind of our measure of whether they were using the words in a real natural situation. Because there were no reinforcement, there was no prompting, we were just playing with the kids.
What were the results? I mean...
Well, first of all, the important thing to know is that not all the children could make it into the study.
Yeah.
If they couldn't do the motor imitation, they had to be eliminated. And there were a lot of kids who had to be eliminated. Probably 40% of the children we initially tried to include in the study had to be eliminated because they could not master the motor imitation. So that's an important thing to understand about kids with autism. Even the most simple skills may be difficult for them to acquire, and those simple skills lay a basis for more complex skills. And if they can't acquire the simple ones, then you can't even attempt to teach them the more complex ones. So that's a limitation right off the bat. Okay, so here are 3 groups of kids. The Milia Communication Treatment Group, these were the kids who got the naturalistic treatment. Mm-hmm. The RMI, and this is number of words their parents reported them producing at home in natural settings, no prompting, just how many words did they use. So of course everybody was very low to begin with because they had to be low to get into the study. These are averages over all the children who participated. So as you can see here for the MCT group, on average the children who received treatment showed a pretty big average increase from about 5 words up to about average again of 75 words in natural conversation. But the thing that's important to look at is this bar here. This bar is the standard deviation. That means there was a lot of variability. Some kids did really well, and some kids didn't do very well at all. For the RMIA group, same sort of picture, very few words to begin with, over 100 words on average at the end of the study, but again, huge, huge variation. And then for the control group, not much change. To answer the question, the first question that might be reasonable to ask is there a difference between the 2 treatments? There's not. Both treatments work about equally well. The question we'd like to ask that I haven't quite finished analyzing the data for is which kids do better?
Yeah.
As I said, some kids do very well, some don't do so well at all, so I'd like to figure out what it is that allows the children to do well, to show these good gains, and what it is that holds other children back. Now, you have to remember that we supplemented these treatments with that parent training.
Yeah.
And I think the parent training is what made these kids that got the rapid motor, the very discrete, explicit behaviors treatment, I think this is what made these kids look so good on these 2 measures, which are measures of natural language. I think without the parent carryover treatment, we might not have seen such great success for these children. But I can't prove that, of course, because I didn't do a group that didn't get the parent training. A variety of means can work. Yeah. What's important is that the means be intensive. We saw the kids 3 times a week for 12 weeks. It was a fairly, and they were seen for almost an hour each time, which is a very long time for a young child with autism. So the treatment was quite intensive. The clinicians were very well trained. They delivered the treatment with great fidelity, and I think that's another thing that made both of these treatments work well, is that the clinicians were completely perfect in the way they delivered the treatment. But also, I think what allowed some children to succeed is that their parents participated in carrying over what the children were learning and gave the child opportunities to use their new skills outside of the therapy session and really encourage them to do it. And that carryover piece, I think, also is an important part of what we need to do with these children to enhance their success.